At 22, I never imagined I'd be standing here, questioning everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and trust. For 3 years, I thought I had it all figured out: my fiancé, my best friend, the person I was supposed to marry. We had been through so much together. From the first moments of awkward teenage love to planning a future that seemed so bright. But little did I know, what was supposed to be the rest of our lives was about to come crashing down. It all started innocently enough: some late-night conversations, texting an old friend. I never thought much of it at first. But the way she started acting, more secretive, more distant, left me feeling like I was in the dark. Every smile, every harmless mention of him, Matt, started to eat away at me. I trusted her, but with every passing day, I felt like I was losing her to someone else. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. Then came the text that changed everything. A message that left me speechless, my heart sinking to the floor. "It's in your court now." What did that even mean? And why was she keeping it from me? Was I just another chapter in her life, a backup plan? Would I have the courage to confront her and finally find out the truth? Or would I be left to question everything I thought I knew about our relationship? The whole thing started to fall apart. When I noticed the first signs, the little changes that, in hindsight, were glaring red flags, I ignored. It was a normal November evening, or so I thought. We were curled up on the couch, watching some random show on Netflix she had picked out. She was excited about it, talking about how Matt, an old friend of hers, had recommended it to her. At that point, I didn't think much of it. Matt was an old crush from her past, someone she had mentioned a few times but nothing alarming. But then the pattern started. She'd mention him in passing more often than ever before, bringing him up in the most random of conversations. We could be discussing our plans for Halloween, and out of nowhere, she'd bring up how Matt liked Halloween too. Why was he suddenly such a key part of every casual conversation we had? I told myself it was nothing, that she was just catching up with an old friend. But deep down, I felt like something was shifting between us. The next clue came when she became glued to her phone. This wasn't like her. Normally, she'd leave her phone in another room or let it rest on the coffee table, only checking it every once in a while. But now? She was texting nonstop, her fingers flying across the screen, eyes glued to the tiny display. Every time I asked her who she was talking to, she'd just brush me off with a nonchalant, "Oh, just friends." I wasn't buying it. Something about her tone was off, and I started feeling like I was the one being shut out. One evening, as we sat together watching a movie, I noticed she'd left her phone on the couch while she went to grab a snack. Without thinking, I picked it up and unlocked it. There it was, Matt's name in her messages. They were discussing the exact show we had just started watching. She had never mentioned that he'd suggested it. Was this something they had talked about together before? The realization hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I felt stupid, betrayed even. Here we were, watching something I thought was our thing, and it turns out it had already been their thing. I scrolled back through the messages, each one revealing more than I wanted to see. It wasn't just casual conversations or friendly updates. She was sending him selfies, pictures of outfits she was thinking about wearing to work. I didn't even know she took that many selfies. And then, I saw it, the one that really made me question everything. It was a photo of us, carving pumpkins together, a moment I thought was ours, shared between the two of us. But she had sent it to him with the caption, "Look at us being cute." It felt like a gut punch. A memory that was supposed to be private, just between us, had been shared with him. That was the first time I really felt like something was deeply wrong. She was letting him in on our lives, our most intimate moments, and I was just standing on the sidelines, unaware. Later that night, as we were sitting on the couch, she casually mentioned how Matt was such a great guy and how she missed talking to him all these years. I didn't respond, just staring at the screen, trying to keep my feelings in check. But the seed had been planted. I started replaying everything in my head, the way she'd been acting, the distance between us, and now this. I couldn't help but wonder if this was all just the beginning. The next day, as I sat there, the same questions echoed in my mind. What was really going on? Was I just a placeholder in her life, a backup, while she tried to rekindle something with Matt? Why hadn't she been honest with me from the start? I knew something had to give. I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. But how could I confront her without coming off as paranoid, jealous, or controlling? I didn't want to be that guy, the one who overreacts over nothing. But everything felt wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being left behind for someone else. It wasn't just the texts or the selfies. It was the way she made him a constant presence in our relationship, a shadow lurking in every conversation, every moment we shared. And the worst part was that I let it happen. I let it go on, brushing it off because I didn't want to face the reality. But now, that reality was staring me in the face, and I couldn't pretend it wasn't there anymore. I needed answers. I needed to know where I stood in her life. Was I the person she wanted to build a future with? Or was I just the guy who was holding on to something she no longer cared about? And that night, I realized I couldn't wait any longer to find out. The tension between us only grew after that night. The next day, she acted like everything was normal, making coffee, talking about work, asking if I wanted to go out for lunch. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that our connection wasn't what it used to be. Every time she looked at me, it was like she saw a stranger, not the person she'd been with for years. I kept replaying the events in my head, thinking about everything I had seen, the selfies, the texts, the photo of us carving pumpkins. How did it all come to this? I needed to confront her. I couldn't keep letting this slide, letting her act like everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. But how do you even bring something like that up without sounding like you're accusing someone of betrayal? It wasn't just about the texts anymore. It was about the fact that I felt completely out of the loop, like I wasn't the person she was turning to when things got tough or when she needed support. Matt was filling that role, even if she didn't want to admit it. That evening, as she sat across from me at the dinner table, I could feel the weight of the conversation hanging in the air. She was talking about something trivial, some work drama, but my mind was elsewhere, focused on everything that had happened. I could see her glancing at her phone every few seconds, as if waiting for a message, or maybe just making sure I didn't look at it. I didn't want to start the fight, but I couldn't hold back any longer. "We need to talk," I said, breaking the silence. I could see her eyes widen, a nervous smile creeping onto her face. She knew exactly what was coming, but she didn't want to face it. She didn't want to have the conversation that would unravel everything. She sat down next to me, her fidgeting hands giving away her nerves. I didn't want to be the one to sound like a jealous boyfriend, but at this point, I wasn't worried about what I was going to say. I needed the truth. I needed to know what was really going on. "I saw the messages," I said, watching her face go pale as the color drained from her cheeks. For a moment, she said nothing. Her gaze dropped to the floor, avoiding mine. "What messages?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Don't play dumb." "I saw the texts with Matt. I saw the selfies, the picture of us carving pumpkins. You've been sharing everything with him like you've already forgotten about me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't want to sound like I was accusing her, but there was no denying what I had seen. It hurt to see her so casual about it, like it didn't matter. At first, she tried to deny it, brushing it off as if it was nothing, just friendly banter between old friends. "He's just someone I knew a long time ago." "It doesn't mean anything," she said, but there was a crack in her voice, a hesitation that made me question whether she was telling the truth. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but she was trying to cover it up, to pretend it wasn't what it clearly was. "I don't care about the friendship," I said, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "I care about the fact that you're hiding things from me, things that should have been between us. You're not just talking to him. You're sharing our lives with him, like I don't even matter." She shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. "It's not like that. I never meant for it to go this far." "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" I repeated, my voice rising now. "But it did. And the worst part is that you're not even being honest with me. You're letting him into our lives, letting him into moments that were supposed to be ours. You didn't even tell me he was the one who recommended that show we were watching. How many other things have you been hiding?" She didn't answer right away. I could see her struggling with the words, trying to find a way to explain herself. She wiped her eyes and then looked up at me, her face full of regret. I was just confused. "I never thought it would get this complicated," she said quietly. "Complicated?" I asked, incredulous. "You don't get to make this complicated. You either choose me, or you choose him. It's that simple. You don't get to have both." She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. "I know about the message. It's in your court now." "What was that about?" I demanded, my anger rising again. "Was he waiting for you to make a move? Did he know that you were already emotionally checked out of our relationship?" Her face faltered, and she couldn't meet my gaze. "It was nothing. He was just being flirty." "It didn't mean anything," she said, but I could hear the doubt in her voice. "If it didn't mean anything, why did she screenshot it and send it to her best friend? Why did you send that to your best friend?" I asked, the frustration evident in my voice. "Why didn't you tell me about it? If it didn't mean anything, why are you keeping him a secret from me?" She didn't have a good answer for that. She stammered, trying to explain herself. But it was clear she was avoiding the truth. Her body language screamed guilt. She couldn't look me in the eye, and every time she tried to speak, it felt rehearsed. Like she was trying to justify her actions rather than admitting she had made a mistake. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Well, you did," I replied, feeling my heart sink. "You hurt me by keeping things From me, by hiding the truth. I thought we were building a life together, but now I'm wondering if I was just a backup plan all along. That was the moment everything changed. I had spent so long trying to believe in us, in what we had, but now it felt like all those years were a lie. I had given her everything, my trust, my love, my future, and she had been hiding something from me the entire time. She didn't know how to respond, and neither did I. What was left to say after that? How could I even begin to trust her again? When everything we had built had been shattered by her actions, the days that followed were the hardest. It wasn't just the anger or the confusion. It was the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I couldn't stop thinking about everything I had seen, the pictures, the texts, the way she'd been hiding things. It felt like my whole world had shifted beneath me, and now, I was just floating, trying to figure out where I even stood anymore. The worst part was the silence. She didn't try to talk to me for a couple of days after that. She seemed to know the weight of what she had done. I spent most of that time alone, replaying every moment in my head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. How had I missed all the signs? I had spent so much time focusing on our future, building plans, talking about marriage, when in reality, she was already emotionally checked out. I felt like a fool for not noticing sooner, but even as the anger and hurt took over, there was still a part of me that wanted to believe in us. I kept wondering if there was a way to fix it, to somehow go back to the way things were. I questioned whether this was just a momentary lapse, a mistake, or if it was something deeper, something that had been building for a while. Could we salvage this? Could we rebuild trust, or was it already too late? It wasn't until she reached out again that I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. She texted me late one evening, asking if we could talk. Her message was simple: I need to explain myself. Can we please sit down and talk? I never meant for any of this to happen. I stared at the phone, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me. After everything that had happened, she still thought a simple text would fix things? I had no desire to hear her apologies or explanations. She had already made her choice. She had already shown me who she really was, and I wasn't sure I could go back to trusting her, no matter what she said, but I knew I needed closure. I needed to face her and hear her words, no matter how painful they were. So, I agreed to meet her, not out of hope, but because I needed to hear the truth, the whole truth, and nothing less. When I walked into the apartment that day, the atmosphere was thick with tension. She was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy like she had been crying. I could see the guilt all over her face. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't fully sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she got caught. She was sorry that the perfect little life she'd been living had been disrupted. Are you okay? She asked softly, her voice trembling. I wanted to snap at her, to tell her that nothing was okay, that everything was broken, but I held it in. I couldn't afford to lose control again. I needed to stay calm, to get through this conversation, without letting her manipulate me into feeling guilty for being hurt. I'm not okay, I finally said, sitting down across from her. How could I be? I've been trying to figure out where I went wrong, why you felt the need to do all of this behind my back. And then you keep saying you didn't mean for it to go this far. That doesn't make sense to me. She looked down, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. I know I messed up, but I was just confused. I didn't think it would get this far. I never meant to hurt you. I couldn't believe she was still going with the same excuses. I had heard them before, but hearing them now only made me feel more certain that she wasn't being honest with me. If she had really wanted to fix things, she would have told me the truth from the start. She wouldn't have kept hiding things. I get that people make mistakes, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But this wasn't just a mistake. You actively chose to go behind my back. You made the decision to talk to him, to share our life with him, and then you even went to see him in person. You can't keep playing this off as some big misunderstanding. Her face turned pale, and she looked away. I never meant for it to go this far, she repeated, her voice breaking. I got caught up in the excitement of reconnecting with him. I didn't realize how much it would hurt you until now. That's not an excuse, I said, my voice firm. You've been lying to me for weeks, and you think a couple of apologies will fix that? You had a choice, and you made it. You chose him over me. And that's the part one can't get over. She started to cry, her shoulders shaking as she tried to explain herself, but I was done listening. I couldn't sit there anymore, hearing her try to justify her actions. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore, it was about respect. And she had lost mine the moment she decided to betray me. I'm done, I said, standing up. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. You've shown me who you are, and I can't be with someone who isn't honest with me. I started to gather my things, ignoring the pleading look in her eyes. She wanted me to stay, to fix things, but I couldn't. Not anymore. The trust had been shattered, and no amount of apologies could fix that. You can't just walk away," she said desperately, trying to stop me. "Please, don't leave me." But I didn't stop. "I'm not the one who walked away," I said as I grabbed my bag. "You did that when you decided to keep secrets from me." As I walked out the door, I could hear her calling after me, but I didn't turn back. I couldn't. She had made her choice, and now, I had to make mine. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: hurt, anger, frustration, and confusion. I had left, and I knew it was the right decision, but walking away from someone you had planned a future with, someone who had once been your best friend, wasn't easy. I spent most of my time at my parents' house, trying to get some space to clear my head, but even there, I couldn't escape the chaos in my mind that I kept going over everything, trying to piece together where things had gone wrong. The conversations, the texts, the small signs I had ignored. I thought back to every moment when I had brushed off the little doubts, convinced that I was just overthinking things. But now, it was clear to me, I wasn't the one who had messed up, I wasn't the one who had been dishonest. She had made her choice, and I was just left holding the pieces of a relationship that no longer existed. I had to make peace with it, no matter how painful it was. But there was a lingering thought in the back of my mind: had I really seen the full picture? Maybe there was more to it, more that I didn't understand. Or was I just being consumed by anger and hurt, seeing things that weren't there? I didn't know anymore, but I knew I couldn't go back. The first night at my parents' house, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her, how she must be feeling now that everything had fallen apart. Was she regretting it? Was she genuinely sorry for what she had done, or was she just trying to save face? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I had to go back and confront her one last time. I had to hear her out, even if it meant hearing more of the same excuses. But when I walked back into the apartment a few days later, everything felt different. The air was thick with tension, and she was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She was waiting for me, and I could see the guilt all over her face. But there was something else there too, something that felt like desperation. "I've been thinking about everything," she started, her voice trembling. "And I know I messed up. I never meant for any of this to happen. I don't want to lose you." I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. "You don't get to say that now," I said, my voice steady but filled with anger. "You don't get to mess up and then come back like everything's okay. You made your choices. You chose to lie, to hide things from me, to betray me. And now, you want to fix it with a few words." Her eyes welled up with tears, and she reached out to touch my arm. But I pulled away, not wanting her touch, not wanting any more empty apologies. "I know," she said, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you, and I can't take that back. But I want to make things right. I want to fix what I've broken. I'm sorry for everything." I shook my head, unable to keep the anger from rising again. "You can't fix this. You can't just apologize and expect me to forget everything. What we had, it's gone. It's been destroyed by your actions." She stared at me, tears streaming down her face, but I didn't feel sorry for her anymore. I had spent so much time trying to make excuses for her, trying to convince myself that we could work through it. But now, I saw her for who she really was. She wasn't the person I thought I knew. She had been playing me all along, keeping me in the dark while she entertained another relationship on the side. "You had your chance," I said, my voice colder now. "You had every chance to be honest with me, to tell me the truth. But you didn't. And now, you want me to believe that you've changed? That you'll do whatever it takes to make it right? It's too late for that." She was silent for a moment, her shoulders shaking as she cried. I stood there, watching her, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no guilt. Only relief. Relief that I was finally seeing things for what they were. "I'm done," I said, my voice firm. "I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who doesn't respect me, who doesn't value our relationship. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." She looked up at me, her face full of desperation. "Please don't leave me," she begged. "I can't live without you. I'll do anything. Please, just give me a chance." But I didn't budge. I had heard enough. I had been the one fighting for this relationship while she was out making decisions behind my back. She wasn't sorry for what she had done, she was sorry that she had been caught. And that was the moment I realized I could never go back. "I'm taking my things," I said, turning to walk away. "You'll have to figure out your own life from now on." As I gathered my things, she tried to stop me, but I couldn't hear her anymore. I had made up my mind. I had given everything I could to this relationship, and in the end, I was left with nothing but a broken heart. I walked out the door, closing it behind me for the last time. The drive from her apartment to my parents' house was long and filled with a strange kind of emptiness. I couldn't help but feel like I was living in a fog, the weight of everything weighing down on me. I had just walked away from a person I thought I would spend the rest of my life with, and even though I knew it was the right choice, it felt Like I was losing a part of myself. I spent the first few days at my parents' house in silence, replaying everything in my mind. It was hard to find peace with it all, especially when I kept asking myself, how did I not see this coming? I had loved her for years, and yet I felt like a complete stranger to the person she had become. How could I have been so blind? How could I have been so trusting, so willing to believe in something that was clearly unraveling before my eyes? But as the days passed, I started to focus on myself again. I realized that I had been so consumed by her and the relationship that I had lost sight of who I was. I had been living for us, for our future, for the life I thought we were going to build. Now, I had to figure out who I was without her, without the life we had planned out. A few days later, just as I was starting to feel like I could breathe again, I got a call from my friend. His wife, who was close with my ex's friends, had heard some things. I didn't know if I was ready for any more drama, but I knew I had to hear what was going on. My friend sounded hesitant when he called me, but eventually, he said, "Man, you're gonna want to hear this." I braced myself for the worst. After everything, I didn't know what I was expecting, but I certainly didn't expect what I heard next. Apparently, right after we broke up, my ex ran straight to Matt, the same guy she had been talking to behind my back. They spent a week or two together, hooking up, reconnecting. For a brief moment, I felt a sharp pang of jealousy and betrayal all over again. I thought I was over her, that I had moved on. But hearing this, it hit me. It felt like the last shred of dignity I had left had been taken from me. But as I listened to my friend, the story took a turn. Apparently, after a few weeks, Matt had dumped her. Just like that. He had used her, slept with her, and then left. The worst part? He went right back to his girlfriend. She had been nothing more than a fling. For him, something exciting for a couple of weeks. But when it was over, he moved on. And now, she was left alone, with nothing. In that moment, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't about wanting her to be miserable, it was about the fact that this was karma, playing out exactly as it should. She had thrown away our 3-year relationship for a guy who wasn't even willing to commit to her, and in the end, he discarded her just like that. It was like watching everything come full circle. I realized then that it wasn't just about me being hurt. It was about the fact that she had made her choices, and they were coming back to haunt her. She had sacrificed everything we had for a fling, for someone who didn't even care about her. And now, she had nothing left. I wasn't going to call her, wasn't going to reach out. I didn't need to hear from her anymore. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. All the lies, all the secrecy, it had all caught up to her. And as much as it hurt, I knew I had dodged a bullet. It was time to move on. It was time to stop looking back and finally let go of the past. I had spent enough time on her, enough time worrying about what went wrong. Now, it was about rebuilding my life, rediscovering who I was without her. The days that followed were strangely calm. The weight that had been pressing down on me for months seemed to have lifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I no longer had to worry about what she was doing, who she was talking to, or whether or not I was being deceived. The clarity was refreshing, but also unsettling. It was like waking up from a long nightmare and realizing that the life you thought you had built was never really yours to begin with. I spent a lot of time reflecting during those days, thinking about everything I had learned about myself and about her. I had been so focused on her needs, on our relationship, that I had forgotten about my own. For so long, I had been her support system, the one who took care of everything, financially, emotionally, you name it. I had helped her through tough times, been there for her when she needed it most, and all I had gotten in return was betrayal. It was hard to wrap my head around the fact that I had invested so much in someone who didn't value me in the way I thought she did. One evening, while I was still staying at my parents' house, I received another message. This time, it was from her. She had been sending me texts every few days since I left, trying to reach out, but I had ignored them. I didn't want to get caught up in her game again. I had made my decision, and I wasn't about to go back on it. But this one felt different. It was a long message, full of apologies, regret, and promises of change. She said she realized how much she had messed up and that she would do whatever it took to make things right. She admitted that she had been confused and had made mistakes, but now, she was willing to face the consequences. She begged for one more chance. At first, I just stared at the message, feeling numb. I had heard it all before, the same empty promises, the same regrets. I had heard her tell me that she would change, that she would do better, but all of that had proven to be nothing more than words. I had given her every chance, and each time, she had disappointed me. There was no more room for second chances. I sat there, thinking about how much I had already given her, how much I had invested in this relationship, and how little I had received in return. I realized then that this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. I had spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to salvage something that wasn't meant to be. but I had to stop. I had to stop trying to fix her, stop trying to make her the person I wanted her to be. The reality was, she was never going to change, and I was never going to get the relationship I deserved from her. I finally responded. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I gave you everything I had, and you threw it away. You've shown me who you really are, and I'm done. It wasn't a long message, but it was the truth. There was no more room for apologies, no more room for lies. Her response came almost immediately, full of more pleading, more promises. But this time, I didn't let it affect me. I didn't feel the need to explain myself further or try to justify my decision. I had made up my mind. I was done. The next few days were a blur as I packed up the last of my things from the apartment. It felt strange being back there, walking through the place that had once felt like home, but now felt like a stranger's house. The memories of the good times we had shared were still there, but they no longer held the same meaning. It wasn't our home anymore. It was just a place that reminded me of a life I had lost. I was leaving behind a version of myself that had been wrapped up in her, in the relationship, in the future we were supposed to have. And though it hurt like hell, I knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't keep living in a fantasy where everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I had to face the reality of what had happened and move forward. As I walked out the door for the last time, I felt a sense of finality. There was no turning back now. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. About my future. About taking back control of my life and not letting someone else dictate my happiness. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments where I would question whether I had made the right decision. But deep down, I knew I had. I had given her more than enough chances, and now it was time to give myself a chance. A chance to heal, to grow, and to move on. I had learned my lesson. I would never again let someone make me feel less than I deserve. I would never again settle for a relationship that wasn't built on trust, respect, and honesty. I was done with the lies, done with the games, and done with the person who had betrayed me. It was time to start over. Days turned into weeks, and as I settled into my new routine, the healing process began. The initial sting of betrayal faded, replaced by a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I could think clearly, without the constant weight of confusion and doubt hanging over me. It was strange, almost surreal, to feel like I could breathe without the pressure of a failing relationship suffocating me, but that wasn't to say it was all smooth sailing. There were nights when the loneliness crept in, when I couldn't shake the feeling of being left behind. I found myself revisiting old memories, the ones that had once made me smile. But each time, I reminded myself that those memories no longer had any place in my life. They were a part of a chapter that was closed for good. And no matter how much it hurt, I couldn't keep holding on to something that no longer existed. I threw myself into work, into rebuilding the parts of myself I had neglected. I started focusing on things I had put on the back burner for years, passions I had ignored, friendships I had let slip away, and personal goals I had put aside. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but with each passing day, I could feel myself growing stronger. I was no longer defined by my relationship, by the person I thought I would spend forever with. I was learning who I was without her, and that person wasn't as lost as I thought, but just when I thought I had it all figured out, she reached out to me again. This time, it was through a mutual friend. I didn't want to hear from her. I had made it clear that I was done, that I needed space, and yet she persisted. The messages were full of apologies, promises to change, and pleas for another chance. She said she had learned her lesson and that she regretted everything. She wanted me back, wanted to rebuild what we had. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure what I should feel. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to see if maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to work things out. But deep down, I knew better. I had been down this road before, and I wasn't going to let myself be fooled again. The truth was, I wasn't the same person anymore. I had changed, and the relationship I had with her was no longer something I could return. I spent a few days thinking about it, reflecting on everything that had happened and how far I had come since the breakup. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of weakness, moments when I questioned if I was being too harsh, too quick to let go. But every time I thought about going back, I reminded myself of everything I had learned, the pain, the lies, the betrayal, and the fact that I deserved better than that. Finally, I sent her a message. It was brief, but it was clear. I'm sorry, but I've moved on. I can't go back to what we had. I hope you understand. There was no room for negotiation, no room for more empty promises. I had already given her more than enough chances. And I wasn't going to let her drag me back into the same cycle of lies and heartbreak. She tried to call me, tried to convince me that things could be different, that she had changed. But I ignored it all. I wasn't going to let myself be manipulated again. The relationship was over, and it had been over for a long time. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I couldn't be the one to save her anymore. Was time for me to focus on my own future, on building a life that was mine and mine alone. I wasn't going to waste another second on someone who had already shown me their true colors. I had learned the hard way that love wasn't enough if trust and respect weren't there. And the hardest part, the part one had to come to terms with, was that love wasn't always enough to fix everything. I blocked her number and deleted her messages, knowing that the more I held on to those last scraps of the past, the harder it would be to truly move on. It was painful, but it was necessary. I had to let go, and this was the final step. As I walked away from that chapter of my life, I felt a strange sense of peace. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. Free from the lies, free from the guilt, free from the person who had once meant the world to me. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it was mine to walk, and that was something I had taken for granted for far too long. It was time to take control of my own life again, to find happiness on my own terms, without relying on anyone else to define it for me. I had a long way to go, but I knew one thing for sure: whatever happened next, it would be my choice. As time passed, the heavy cloud of betrayal slowly began to lift. I didn't realize how much emotional weight I had been carrying until it was gone. It felt like I could finally live my life again without constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering what would go wrong next. For the first time in months, I found myself genuinely smiling, laughing with friends, and enjoying the little moments without the shadow of my past relationship looming over me. I focused more on myself. I took long walks in the evenings, something I hadn't done in a while. I reconnected with old friends who had been there all along, but I had neglected because I was so wrapped up in my failed relationship. I started reading again, books I had put aside during the years when I was too consumed by someone else's life to focus on my own. I even started working out, feeling stronger not only physically but emotionally as well. Each step I took felt like a reclaiming of who I was before I met her, before I let my identity become entwined with someone else's. But even in the midst of my healing, the thought of her crept into my mind from time to time. I would wonder how she was doing, whether she had really learned her lesson or if she was still stuck in the same cycle of mistakes. It was hard to completely let go of the person I had invested so much of myself into. It wasn't just the good times I missed, but the idea of what could have been, the future I thought we would build together, all the plans we had made that would never come to fruition. One day, while I was scrolling through social media, I saw a post from one of her mutual friends. It was a picture of her at a party, looking happy, smiling, surrounded by people. For a split second, I felt a pang of something. Maybe it was jealousy, or maybe it was just the last shred of attachment I had left. It hit me how easily she seemed to be moving on, how quickly she had found a way to enjoy life again while I was still processing everything. But then, as quickly as the feeling came, it passed. I remembered everything I had learned, everything I had gone through. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. She wasn't my responsibility anymore. I had given her the opportunity to be honest, to be open, and she had thrown it all away. It wasn't about her anymore, it was about me, and it had to stay that way. The real turning point came when I realized that I wasn't just healing from the relationship. I was healing from the emotional scars I hadn't even realized were there. I had spent so long doubting myself, questioning my worth, wondering if I was enough. But now, I could finally say that I was enough, not for her, but for me. I didn't need anyone else to define my worth. I was whole on my own, and that realization gave me a peace I hadn't known in years. It was also around this time that I started thinking about the future again, not the future I had planned with her, but the future I could build for myself. I could see possibilities ahead, new relationships, new experiences, new opportunities. And for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was complete on my own the first few months. After the breakup had been difficult, but as I started to rebuild, I began to see just how much strength I had gained. I had faced something I never thought I'd have to go through, and I had survived. And not just survived, I was thriving. I was growing into the person I had always wanted to be, and I realized that I deserved someone who would appreciate that. Who would love me for who I was, flaws and all. One evening, as I was sitting with a friend at a local bar, enjoying a drink, they casually asked, "So, have you moved on?" For the first time, I smiled genuinely and said, "I'm getting there." It wasn't just about moving on from her. It was about moving on from everything that had kept me stuck: fear, doubt, and insecurity. It was about moving on to a new chapter of my life where I wasn't just surviving, I was finally living. A few months had passed since the breakup, and though there were still moments of reflection, I was finally beginning to feel like myself again. The pain that had once consumed me had started to fade, and in its place was a quiet confidence, a knowing that I was stronger than I had realized. I wasn't just healing, I was evolving. One evening, as I was finishing up some work at my desk, I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I hesitated. It had been a while since I had heard from her, and I knew that anything she had to say wasn't something I needed to hear. But curiosity got the best of me. I opened the message. It was from my ex. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know I messed up, but I need you to know that I've been doing a lot of soul searching. I regret everything. I just want you to know that I've changed. I've learned from my mistakes. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you're doing okay. It felt like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected to hear from her again. After everything that had happened, I thought she had finally moved on. It seemed like she had found some peace, or at least that's what I had convinced myself of. But here she was, reaching out again, looking for a connection, a lifeline. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond. Part of me wanted to tell her that I had moved on, that I was doing just fine without her. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I had already given her more chances than she deserved. I had already laid my heart on the line and gotten nothing in return. I wasn't going to let her back in, not even for closure. There was nothing left to fix. Instead, I took a deep breath and deleted the message without responding. It wasn't about being cold or indifferent. It was about self-respect. I had finally gotten to a place where I didn't need her validation or her apologies to move forward. I was no longer waiting for her to fix what she had broken. The only person who could fix me was me. That night, I sat back in my chair and let out a sigh of relief. The peace I felt was not just because I had made the right choice in not responding, but because I had truly let go. I had stopped clinging to the past, to a version of a future that was never going to happen. I had stopped wishing for things to turn out differently and started accepting them for what they were. The next few days were filled with a new kind of clarity. I realized that I was no longer looking over my shoulder at what could have been. I wasn't wondering if I had made the right decision or if she was regretting what she had done. The truth was, her actions had already shown me everything I needed to know. She had made her choices, and those choices had led us here. The chapter was closed, and it was time to move forward. Without looking back, I started planning new things for my future. I took up a new hobby, something I had always wanted to try but never had the time for before. I started traveling more, taking trips to places I had always wanted to visit. I found myself rediscovering passions and interests that had been buried for years. It felt like I was living again, truly living, not just surviving day to day. It was also around this time that I realized just how much I had grown. The emotional weight of the past no longer held me back. I had learned how to trust myself again, how to set boundaries, how to walk away from things that weren't serving me. I had become stronger than I had ever been, and I was proud of that. One day, I ran into an old friend at a cafe. We had lost touch for a while, but seeing them again felt like a reminder of who I used to be, before the relationship, before all the pain and heartache. We talked for hours, catching up on life, and it felt so good to connect with someone who knew me before I was tangled up in someone else's life. It reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I had people who cared about me, people who valued me for who I was. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely excited about the future. I wasn't defined by my past mistakes or by someone else's actions. I was moving forward on my own terms, building the life I wanted, not the life I had been forced into. I knew that there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of them. I was ready to face whatever came my way, with a clear mind and a full heart. As the months went by, life continued to shift in a way I never expected. There were times when I thought about how I had let my past relationship define me for so long. It had consumed me, my thoughts, my actions, my identity. But now, I was more than just the person who had been betrayed. I was the person who had overcome it, and that realization filled me with an undeniable sense of strength. One of the most liberating things was rediscovering my independence. I didn't realize how much I had given up of myself while I was in that relationship. I had stopped doing the things I loved, stopped pursuing my own dreams because I was so focused on us, on her, on what we were supposed to become. But now, I was living for me again, and it felt incredible. I met new people, made new connections, but this time, I wasn't in a rush to define anyone as my future. I wasn't looking for validation from others anymore. I was happy on my own, and that was something I had never truly understood before. The most profound thing was realizing that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I had been complete all along. I had just forgotten. It wasn't long before I started dating again. I took it slow, learning to trust myself and my instincts. But the thing was, I wasn't looking for someone to fill a void. I wasn't looking for someone to fix me or give me what I felt I lacked. I was looking for someone who would meet me where I was, someone who respected me, my boundaries, and my independence. It wasn't about finding the one anymore. It was about finding someone who aligned with the version of myself I was becoming. Dating was different this time. I wasn't consumed by fear or insecurity. I wasn't constantly wondering if I was enough or if the person I was with was going to hurt me. I had learned how to protect myself emotionally, how to set clear boundaries, and how to walk away if something didn't feel right. For the first time in years, I felt secure in my own skin. And then, one evening, I bumped into her. My ex. It was totally unexpected. I was out with some friends, and there she was, standing across the room. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I felt the familiar rush of emotions, the awkwardness, the anger, the sorrow. But this time, it was different. There was no burning desire to confront her, to settle old scores. I didn't feel anger or bitterness. Instead, I felt calm. I felt indifferent. She saw me and walked over, her expression filled with hesitation. There was a moment of silence before she spoke. "Hey, I just wanted to check in and see how you were doing. I know we left things on a bad note, and I wanted to apologize again." I nodded, my face neutral. "I appreciate that," I said. "I've moved on. I'm doing well. I'm in a better place now." She looked at me, a mix of regret and longing in her eyes. I could tell she was hoping for something more, maybe a sign that we could go back to what we once had. But the truth was, there was no going back. I had already moved on, and I wasn't holding on to any resentment. I had forgiven her, but I had also forgiven myself for staying in a situation that wasn't right for me. "I'm glad you're okay," she said softly, almost as if she was relieved to hear it. "I am," I replied, offering her a faint smile. "Take care of yourself." That was it. No drama, no closure needed. It was the final piece of the puzzle, letting go of the idea that there was anything left to resolve. It was over, and I was finally at peace with it. As I walked away from her that night, I felt free. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just free. Free to live my life without the weight of the past dragging me down. Free to make my own choices, to build the future I wanted, without anyone else's approval or validation. And that was the most powerful thing of all.